I'm in a relationship now, but because I'm attracted to my partner and I really value this person, I value their opinion and all of that, I still feel like it's been a while since we've been together, but I still feel self-conscious around us. I would say for quite a few times I feel self-conscious around her when we're just communicating and chatting and stuff. And I think that's because I want to portray an image of myself which I think is worthy of this person, you know. And I think that's what's happening when we're attracted to someone, is we think they're above us, or they're not really above us in a, we just think they're so much larger than what we are. So as a result, we feel small and we feel that we don't really know how to sort of navigate that situation. And I'm feeling this even now after, well, it's been more than a year now. So even now I'm feeling this sense of anxiety or self-consciousness, you know, from time to time. It's lessened drastically, but I'm still feeling it. So what is happening in a small moment when my partner says something, and it could be a small criticism or it could be something which she's noted, and I feel incredibly self-conscious in that moment. So just examining it from the masculine perspective, what I observe is, if I observe what goes on inside my head, I feel really terrible about myself. There's almost this voice in my head which starts really critiquing me, and I feel quite low as a person. And actually the thing which has been said to me doesn't prompt or warrant that response. So what's happening is I've created a voice in my head, there's a voice in my head which is actually really putting me down in that particular moment. And I would call that voice the voice of the patriarch, or the masculine voice, which is that of my father, I think. Because I think when I was growing up, there was an element of, I would say that I was critiqued as a kid, and so because I was critiqued as a kid, I've internalized that voice inside my own head. And what's happening is that voice still now is actually playing up in these small moments, and there's certain moments where that voice is prompted, or there's certain trigger points for that particular voice, you know. So the relationship is one of them. It can also happen at work as well, but we're just talking about the relationship, so I'll stick there. So within the relationship, what can happen is that something small is said, something to do with being organized, or something to do with having a kind of coherent plan or something like that. And planning, I think, in my head is like a masculine trait, so that's why I'm getting really defensive in that particular moment. And that's happening, why? Because previously when I had to do something like that, I feel that there's a strong element of criticism coming in, and because I was critiqued then, there's an element of that critical voice still active, and that's the thing which is actually causing me to feel really self-conscious and defensive in that particular moment. So how do we actually resolve this particular feeling? There's a voice in my head, it's making me feel extra sensitive to anything which I think is to do with masculinity or being organized, or a lot of the times I may also get a sense of self-consciousness regarding being protective or being assertive. All of these I would like sort of deem masculine traits, and there's a sense of self-consciousness or anxiety there, you know. And so a lot of the times in my relationship, I'm feeling self-conscious as a result of that, or there's a component of feeling self-consciousness because of that particular reason. So that's what's actually happening. So what can we do, or what can I do, I suppose, to help overcome this particular, or what can I do to overcome this particular feeling? Now, I was actually thinking about this, and what I've thought of is that depending on how your relationship with your father is, because it's going to actually shape how you behave towards your partner, I think, to an extent. Especially, like I said, there's this element of masculinity which is coming in the relationship. It's partially biological, partially socially constructed. And I think if you had a father who is very critical, what you're going to have is anything which triggers that masculine element in the relationship is going to give you anxiety, basically, because before you don't have that sense of confidence regarding those activities, you know. So if you're someone like me, what I did was, whatever I perceived to be the masculine thing, I rebelled and tried to do the exact opposite of that, and I actually grew quite comfortable in that. So for example, I'm quite comfortable talking about my emotions, which I would deem, archetypally speaking, traditionally feminine traits. I'm quite comfortable being open, compassionate. All of these things I would deem traditionally feminine traits, but anything to do with masculinity I don't like, so I have a sense of defensiveness there. So if you were critiqued maybe you formed a defensive identity as a result of that, which is more archetypally feminine, or there's a different quality to the identity you formed, but it's like in a response to that, you're like, I'm not going to do that because that makes me feel bad, so I'll go and do something else. Or you just feel terrible about yourself all the time and you didn't actually form a reactive identity, and you just feel bad about yourself. So you could either be in that camp where you just feel really bad about yourself. You could be in the camp where you have formed a reactive identity. So you're like, I'm not going to be that because that makes me feel terrible. I'll do something else. Or you could be in the third camp whereby actually your father figure was actually more encouraging, less critical, and as a result, you have a sense of comfort regarding what it means to be a man and what it means to be masculine, so to speak. And so as a result, you are quite comfortable in that. But even then, I would say what you may be doing is, if you haven't thought about what your perspective of masculinity is, you might be actually reenacting what you simply observed your father do, which is, I don't think, entirely healthy, because you are a different person to your father and you can't just emulate your father. You have to form your own perspective on these things, you know. So these are the three camps which I think could be forming in this particular moment, and depending on what your relationship with your father is like. Again, this is just a model which I've just thought up. I'm not saying this is fact or anything like that. You just think of it what you may, basically, or what you do. So you're, in my mind, in these three camps. Either you just feel awful about yourself, or you've formed a reactive identity, or you're basically emulating your father. In all of these three cases, there has to be some degree of integration which needs to occur, whereby you have your own conceptualization of masculinity, which you can then reenact within the domain of your relationship, which is actually taking into consideration your own personality in a clean way, in a way which is not reactive or making you feel bad about yourself. And I think if you can do that, or if I can do that, then I'll be able to feel more comfortable in these domains, whereby I have to behave more masculine in certain moments, basically. Or traditionally masculine, I suppose, which is like more protective or more assertive and all of these things, or more organized or structured and all of that. So what can you do? Well, if you're in the first camp, whereby you just feel awful about yourself and you don't have any identity which you can anchor upon, I think what needs to be done is, essentially what you need to do is start getting out of your comfort zone and start taking some steps whereby you start asserting and finding out who you really are. And how do you actually do that? The only way you do that is trying to look within and trying to see what is it that makes you passionate and interesting and excited about life. What are things which make you feel excited about engaging in life and which energize you and invigorate you as a person, you know. And if you sit down and reflect on that, you may be able to find out what they are. And then it's about jumping into them. And you may be wrong about them, but you still should jump into them, you know. The idea is that whatever that voice is saying you, which is just causing you to be crippled, you can't carry on listening to that voice. What you'll have to do is actually start taking some steps which are against that, or not necessarily against that, but against that in the sense that you're no longer taking that voice too seriously, and start going and exploring different things, whether that's a job or whether that's like finding a new hobby or whatever it is that you do. Stop listening to that voice and push through that voice, and that's going to weaken its grip over you, and you're going to start finding out who you really are, besides what that voice is telling you, you know. And then you're going to start gaining confidence and start feeling more comfortable in yourself. And to be honest, that's why I started doing. And then I found out that I was interested in like more abstract ideas. I was interested in spirituality and all of these things. And these are things which were not just handed to me. These are things which I actually learned as a result of going in different situations and surroundings and finding out what it is that engages with me, you know. And so some element of that critical voice, you begin to overcome that as a result of that. So that's step number one. If you're in that camp where you're just feeling completely crippled, start looking within, start saying what is it that excites you, and then just start taking some steps towards making some degree of progress towards that, you know. And then if you're in the second category, which is my category I suppose now, which is that you feel a sense of confidence regarding who you are because you've rebelled against this particular identity, I think what the wisest thing there is to start reconnecting with your dad. Because if you start connecting with your parents, but especially your father, what you're going to do is you're going to start letting go of some of this resentment which you're carrying around with you, you know. Fair enough, you don't necessarily like the fact that you have a voice in your head which is critical, that's fine. But now that's your voice, and that's your responsibility to deal with. You can't, there's only so long which you can blame a particular person and hold on to a resentment or anger as a result of that. That's damaging you, that's damaging that person, and it's not benefiting anyone. So I think the beneficial thing there would be is to acknowledge that yes, you formed your identity, but there's an element of reactivity to the identity you formed, and in order to get rid of that reactivity, or to come to terms with the fact that whatever it is that happened, and let go of that resentment or anger which you're holding on to, you should start reconnecting with your father figure. And what that will actually help you do is integrate what was given to you, or what that person was trying to give to you when you were growing up, versus what you've developed on your own accord, and trying to combine the two. And what's going to happen then is that you're not necessarily going to have this sense of resentment around anything which you think is to do with masculinity, or to do with anything which you're critiqued about as a kid. You're going to be able to get over that. But the way to get over that is start re-establishing that connection again, and stop holding into that resentment. And then if you're the third person, where you don't really necessarily have any resentment, but you may have a lack of confidence regarding what you want to do, because you were just given this really useful model and you were encouraged a lot, but essentially you don't necessarily have this confidence to go and out and do something which you essentially fully believe in yourself. And obviously there will be cases where people have fully integrated, they're independent, but they're also partially dependent, and this video is obviously not for you because you're totally fine. But if you're the type of person who has this element which was given to them, and now they're emulating their father but are finding difficulty regarding who they really are, then I would say the same thing which I said to the person in the person who just feels stuck, which is find out what it is that you like. And if you don't know what it is that you like, just start putting yourself into environments which just feel uncomfortable to you and unfamiliar to you. What is something which you find quite scary doing? I'm not saying you start harming yourself, but what is it something which you find quite scary doing? Go into that and start exploring that, and then see how you react. And I think how you would react and the lessons you'd gain from that would actually start helping you find out who you really are as a person, and how you cope with challenges. And what you have is some of the lessons from your past, which have been passed down to you from your father, but then you'd have your own lessons as well, and you'd only have that if you put yourself out into the uncomfortable zone, and then start really gaining or gauging what that basically means and what you think about it yourself. So I think if you're in any of these three camps, the steps are slightly different, but if you do these steps, what I think is going to happen, my perspective, is that you have an integrated vision of your masculinity, and as a result of having this integrated vision of your masculinity, what you would be able to do within the domain of a relationship is that anytime something comes up which is triggering your masculinity, which it will, because a relationship a lot of the times does trigger that, you won't feel resentful, you won't feel like really scared or cowardly or upset or weak, or you won't feel kind of like you just have to repeat what you've seen. You'd have your own perspective on it, and it would be integrated with your past as well, and you'd have a lot of strength regarding that. And I think when you feel strength in your masculinity, you'd be able to feel more confident and more calm around your partner, and you'd be able to do what needs to be done, and actually generally feel quite happy regarding whatever it is that you need to do, and not feel this sense of old neuroses or your past coming in and negatively impacting you essentially. So this is the video for today, and I'll probably make a part 2 as well, whereby I basically talk about how we perceive femininity, and by looking at our relationship with our mother, and how that's actually impacting the relationship, and some of the steps which we can do to sort of resolve any issues regarding in that particular domain or category as well. So that's the video for today, and I hope you guys liked it, and I will see you guys next time.